I'm not doing this for sustainability. I am doing this for business.
Welcome back to The Responsible Edge, a podcast about how to win at business responsibly. I'm Charlie Martin, your host and founder of TrueMark, the mark of trusted sustainability content. And our article this week is titled Empowering Sustainability, a New Era for Chief Sustainability Officers, which was published by Korn Ferry in 2026 and argues that the CSO role is becoming one of the most strategic positions in the enterprise, shifting from risk and compliance towards being seen as a genuine driver of business value. And our expert today, or our guest expert today, I should say, is Katja Tuomola, an expert in sustainability strategy and marketing and communications. She's head of sustainability and marketing communications at Group and a board member at Follicel AS. Katja, it's absolutely brilliant to have you on the show this morning. Thank you so much for giving up some of your time.
Oh, it is so brilliant to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to see where we end up today.
Now, Katja, I am going to let the listeners in and viewers in on what I have to say was one of the most brilliant kind of pre-show conversations I think I've had with any guest on The Responsible Edge. You were so brilliantly refreshing in views of how podcasting really should go, which is I'm not going to overthink it. I'm just here to share my opinion. And ultimately, if it lands well, brilliant. If it doesn't, let's not overthink the thing. And I have to say, that's a lesson I'm going to take on board for future podcasts. So thank you for that.
Being very pragmatic, that's what it is. We are what we are. We give what we give. And I hope that my expertise brings something on the table today.
Fantastic stuff. Now, Katja, before I get your view on the article, I want to just share like my impression when I first kind of read the piece. And again, with a few of the shows recently, I have to admit, I was overwhelmed with a sense of positivity. I thought, wow, what you hear at the moment about, organizations rowing back or pulling back on, commitment and budgets, et cetera, and resource that's going into sustainability as a whole. What an incredibly refreshing article talking about, this changing role, this changing value and significance of CSOs working within organizations. So that was my initial impression. And I want to get your view on your initial impression of the article too.
What struck me first in the article, and after I read it the first time, before I started to analyze what it really is behind it, was that the sustainability is no longer one thing. It's not seen as sustainability only. It's now seen as an umbrella, even. I think it's both an umbrella as a shield and also something to be prepared for the future. So it touches everything. And this is what I find the most interesting, actually.
And that's a really fascinating initial observation on that kind of umbrella. Sort of the role has evolved, if you like. It's become more nuanced. It's become more sophisticated. There are more areas that the chief sustainability officer role covers. I just wanted to sort of get your view on. We hear a lot in the sustainability, profession, process sustainability world, as I alluded to before, talking about the rollback, the lack of resource that's going in, the budgets that are being pulled, et cetera, et cetera. Like this obviously counters that and talks about, I think 62% of executives that were interviewed as part of this piece of research suggesting that budgets are going to increase into their sustainability initiatives. How do you reconcile those two things? Is this article is this the whole truth, or are we ultimately seeing a slightly more optimistic framing of circumstances that we're in because of the nature of who Korn Ferry are and why they put this piece of research together?
First of all, I think partly you're right. When we are talking about chief sustainability officers, this is now we're talking about brands, we're talking about big corporate conglomerates. If you look at people whose titles are the CSOs, you don't typically find this in smaller companies. It could be the larger ones, and maybe we have a bit more optimistic view because we're also getting close to the big brands, which there is a big reputational risks if you lose this sustainability game.
I think what you're alluding to there is fascinating. That the nature of the title CSO is something that's really only found within organizations that are of a certain size and therefore resilience when it comes to budgets, etc., to be able to say, no, we are committing to our sustainability program long term and ultimately able to, which is hence why when we interview a load of CSOs, which Korn Ferry's done with this piece of research, everything sounds incredibly optimistic. So it's who we have in the room that ultimately dictates the nature of the conversation that's been had. The article alludes to this like 8-point toolkit, basically, that of things that a CSO needs to be able to do or needs to factor into the way that they work moving forward. I want to ask you a pretty sort of direct personal question on this. So within your work at Group, how many of those 8 toolkit suggestions resonated with you as things that you do? And were there any that you thought, no, that's not as relevant to me?
It is all applicable. This is a job which it doesn't have any limits within the organization. And it's the good thing for me personally, because I love this part of my job, that I get to deal with the whole organization. But this is also a burden, and especially for new CSOs, or if you are entering a certain business area or changing business areas, this is probably the most difficult part, that you have to have a certain understanding of the business. The procurement, for example, what does the supply chain look like? Who are we affecting with our end product? What's the impact that we're having? And for this understanding, this is what you need to bring really home the value, to bring home what you can do with your data that you're creating in your sustainability reporting and in this world.
Was there anything that you thought, actually, the article hasn't alluded to this really key core part of the way that I operate that, essentially it's not covered?
Yes, this was missing. That what is the company's impact to the other stakeholders, to all of us? For example, I work in a company that in Europe, we are the largest fiber packaging consumer producers. So it's some studies show that that you probably touch 20 times a product a day, which my company has ultimately created because of packaging.
Oh, wow.
This is an impact which is really critical to understand that, and this part is missing from the article.
I think speaking to other sort of senior sustainability professionals such as yourself, I think one of the things that comes through loud and clear is that you've got to really be sort of really fixated with the detail, but equally the language that resonates with all of these different groups that you've got to influence and affect. I just want to touch on, I think your background is so interesting in light of this, because you come from a very technical, scientific background, and now you're in this role that looks at kind of the whole group's sustainability sort of approach and program. How does that background that you have, how has that equipped you to do the role that you're now doing?
Yes, I'm a paper chemist by real profession, and I did the chemist work quite some time, and then I moved to our customer side, which is now this manufacturing board and paper and packaging. And technical background does not hurt you at all, because you have to have an understanding of the data. You have to have integrity in the data. This is one of the problems we have in sustainability overall, that how trustworthy is the data that is coming out, first of all, in what we are doing, but then look at the consumer, look at you when you pick the package and then you read all these claims. Is it really sustainable what you're holding there or not? The data has to be there, and the data has to be credible, because first of all, you cannot lead without any data. Or if you get a report once a year, I can tell you that your CEO is not able to lead any sustainability work with that data if they get it only once a year, because we live in a quarterly cycled world. So the scientific thinking helps a lot with understanding the data and how it needs to flow, because that's the ultimate foundation. If that goes wrong, everything goes wrong in sustainability.
Almost everything else from a communications perspective, from a stakeholder understanding and appreciation, from a supply chain sort of understanding point of view, understanding procurement processes, all of those other kind of touch points, that can all really be learned, I think, through experience and exposure. But ultimately, having that eye for credibility and detail around data and around scientific rigor, like that's something that if you've got that as part of your kind of, your academic and early part of your career background, it gives you that foundation that you've just described. I want to ask you, Katja, a slightly sort of provocative question here, and feel free to give me a strong defensive response to this. But how do you feel personally about the experience of being a sustainability leader in, as you alluded to, like an enormous organization that has huge influence on, as you say, consumers every day throughout Europe have 20 touch points with products that you guys have produced the packaging for? Like, it's a Goliath. It's an oil tanker, to use all the different analogies. How do you feel about working within an organization like that and trying to affect change when it comes to sustainability? Like, just comment on that for me, and feel free to tell me, like, Charlie, that's completely wrong. That's not how I experience my work at all.
This is what I would tell you. You are wrong with this. My cup is usually half full, not half empty. So I'm thinking that whatever impact I can have, it's an impact. It's impact more if I didn't do this job. And sometimes, and actually lately, I've been actually really proud of what I've been able to accomplish. And I don't do sustainability work. I just enable my team to do my teams. Actually, I lead 5 different teams. So I enable these teams to do their job well. And, this kind of leadership, it's always not so rosy, because I'm defending or sometimes I'm defending a side which is kind of difficult to put into a monetary values. One of the important things you have to know and understand is how the financials link to what we are doing. How can I make this so that my boss understands that this is really a good thing and it really brings out money and value in the end game? And for me, it's more of a game also. But I just enjoy it. There are days that are not as good as every day, but mostly, and this is why I love the job, that there is no one day or 2 days that are the same.
You've almost described there that one of the key characteristics of a CSO is to be almost pretty good at pitching, because you're kind of regularly pitching to your chief exec, like, hey, here's this new thing that I'd like to do. And before you get really scared and fearful that I'm the sustainability person and I'm coming to you with something that's going to be defined as a cost, I'm going to get you really excited about the prospect of doing this thing that's ultimately going to be about value creation. I think the article alluded to this as well, that we're moving away from risk and compliance being the focus for the CSO and more towards value creation. Does that require CSOs to get better at pitching?
Yeah, or change management is what is, if I have to say one thing about what is needed for a good CSO, it's change management, and actually communication with the change management, that you have to be able to transfer these very complex topics into very simple language towards the upper management. Then you have to be able to make it into very common language so that everybody, like the neighbors, the granny that lives next door, you would understand that what does this really mean in practice? What do we have to do, or what do we have to deliver? Who has to deliver? And that you get other people also excited that you might have a person in, let's say, procurement that you just come up with all these new things that they need to learn, first of all, take care of, because my team, we cannot do procurement, but we need some adjustments, especially, let's take a practical topic, scope 3. This is a procurement topic because it's mostly around the supply chain that we have, these emissions. And we have to then integrate this there, but it means that I'm going to use their time. We are going to take their time, and I need to make their boss, first of all, convinced that this is what we need to do. And we need to also be able to talk with these different, very different parts of the organization. Financial controllers tend to be working with a different mode than environmental manager in a big board machine.
It sounds like from an MM Group perspective that you're given the kind of jurisdiction and you're given the sort of tools and the support that you need to have, as you said, doing work that's having real impact. What are those key elements or key characteristics of the conditions that you find yourself working in that have enabled you to do so?
I joined MM about 2 years ago. And the first thing actually I did I have the teams of sustainability, then responsible sourcing, product safety, health and safety, and marketing and communications. And with sustainability, the first part that I started was that we started to log, just very plain and simple, we started to log on what do we do? How many customer requests are we answering? What type of customer questions these are? And how much time does that consume? This is basic leadership. Because I know that within this kind of world that we're a little bit struggling with the results, that there is always a pressure, and there has been a lot of reductions also in MM Group on people. And the only way to defend on is to show this with numbers, that it's not a thing anymore. It's black and white. This comes back to the data, actually, that it's part of my leadership strategy that I have the people for a reason. And this has to be very also clearly communicated. I just help them to understand what is needed and why it's needed.
Super interesting. Super interesting. And is that out of interest, and not to sort of speak negatively about any previous experiences that you've had, but is that something that at MM Group is particularly prevalent? The fact that you feel that kind of support, that autonomy, to that empowerment to be able to do this? Or is that something that's been consistent throughout all of the roles that you've done?
From my experience, from the business that we are in, this is a mandatory part. Fiber-based packaging materials. You are not amongst the leaders unless you do this. So it is on our side, on this business side. But I have to say that at MM, I have been given, or that we have a very good understanding of these topics. I don't go pushing headfirst that we need to do this in order to save the world. And the management team also knows this, that I'm not doing this for sustainability. I am doing this for business. First is because I will not have a job anymore if the business goes out. We will not have jobs. So that's my number one priority. And I do have some commercial background from my previous roles as well. And this is how I think it's part of why I also have the trust that they trust me, that I will not try to do something just because of it. I'm always going to have a reason why I am requesting something, and it's always going to be commercially or legally related topic.
Other colleagues of yours, knowing you and knowing your approach and knowing your background, that they build trust in the idea that when Katja comes knocking, Katja and team comes knocking to look at something, it is grounded in a real kind of commercial consideration, which must fill them with confidence when they engage with you. I want to now conclude with the magic wand. I'm fascinated to see what you're going to do with the magic wand. Katja, if I was to hand you a magic wand and you could change one thing about the commercial world this instant, what would that one thing be?
Looking forward, sustainable thinking, and that sustainability would be embedded in all investments. It's what will change the world. I see this also in our company, that we have integrated sustainability already a part of, but they have to at least consider that, because sustainability needs to be considered when you're doing investments, because investment is always what we're doing for the future. And this is the magic wand that I hope it's actually actionable, that companies can really do it, but sometimes the companies are not thinking about it. That whatever you're investing in towards the future, it should be invested within the very tight scope of how do we have a better impact sustainability-wise. Health and safety goes into the same box. Health and safety when we talk about in this industrial world. But sustainability should also be there heavily. And that's when we would really see the impact with barely not even investing more money, but investing in a better way.
That's so interesting. That seems like such a relatively obtainable thing, i.e. that, and I know I'm oversimplifying this here, but almost like the sustainability is just on the checklist for every organization out there that's making any investment decision, any resource allocation decision whatsoever, ultimately is looked at through the lens of, okay, let's just think about what this means for sustainability in the long term. From an Group perspective, how does that play out in practice? Is everybody in the procurement team, for example, are they all tasked with, okay, you've just got to factor in sustainability credentials into every decision that you make in terms of who you're partnering with? Is that part of your process?
Yes, becoming part of all the main processes at least, because this is a learning curve for us as well, and the world will never be ready. But a really good example is that I am the last approver of CapEx projects that are over 2 million before our management board, and I will check it. I will check what has been considered here. Has the CO2 figures been considered? Has this been talked with the supplier? What is the footprint of the product? Because this is the only way, really, without investing a lot of money, maybe say 10 years later, to make this piece of machinery more sustainable. And the machines are the ones that are really using the energy. They are producing the CO2s. Not in our industry. We are not the worst, by far not the worst, but it's industry, which is the biggest producer of CO2s and these kinds of using water. So that's why I would like this to be now considered for the future. I know that the world will not change that magically. We just want sustainability to be part of everything, that we want to be so sustainable in the future. It's always money connected.
But indeed it is. And I love that ultimately that's pragmatism, that's reality. But I love the additional, and I'm now going to take the magic wand back from you, Katja, and I'm going to use it to suggest that whole idea of getting, did you say it was beyond a capex value of 2 million euros? Is that, so anything over 2 million euros, you will have final say on in terms of that investment?
Before our management board.
Before your management board. I mean, that is a brilliant mechanism. I think that's, my magic wand says that all organizations that are, of a size that have a CSO, that should be an overnight change. I think that's a fantastic way of baking in sustainability considerations into key decisions moving forward. I love that. Katja, I know that's been a flash in a pan and there's much more that we can talk about, but for now we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me today. That was That was really, really interesting. I've certainly learned a lot.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for not pushing me to let's do it this way. This was the really good conversation, and it also helps me clarify my thoughts for the future. I now also have one task that I need to be putting forward after your magic wand thing.
Very good. Thank you, Katja. And that's all for today's episode of The Responsible Edge. A big, big thank you to Katja Tuomola for joining me on today's show. As a reminder, this episode was brought to you by TrueMark, the mark of trusted sustainability content. Visit truemark.com to learn more. I'm Charlie Martin. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe, share, leave us a review. See you next time.